You don't want to go in there all by yourself, do you?
C.s.w. presents Incarnation Red.
Episode 22. Interference. To resume official discussion on case number 1488. Case number 1488. Perhaps it's best to simply start where I left off, namely the rather abrupt appearance of several fireflies outside my home during my last official record of findings. I will confess that initially, my mind went to the possibility of chance, of pure coincidence that I should see this insect in almost the same breath as discussing it, especially when, as I've found from listening to my own clients, it's so easy to presume preternatural influence when the human brain makes spurious connections. But this consideration was instantly snuffed when in sight of the sheer number of them, the great mass of green blinking lights tessellating at me from the dark. And perhaps in awe of this, I was moved to take up the paperweight whose identity is carefully noted in this case file and approach the swarm with it in hand. Spare recordings made on a handset during investigation of this phenomenon, and carefully included in this case file as well, will show that upon my approach and my placement of the paperweight down on my front yard, something happened. The swarm reacted in a way that, as I have since divined through research on the nature of the firefly, is in no way typical at all. Joining together, almost as one being, they descended toward the paperweight, immediately bound for its trajectory without varying or wandering at all, and planted each of them upon its glass surface. Strange already, this is, but nothing that couldn't be explained away on the scientific air of insects' generally unpredictable behavior and the curious refraction of light. What followed cannot be explained. Not by science, not by physics, but hopefully by me. The fireflies. I could see them all turn their bodies irrespective of one another, but in the same way nonetheless. Turn their bodies to face the top of the sphere. And then they went still. And they all glowed simultaneously, long, steady, brighter than I could have predicted. And then, then the paperweight burst, shattered into so many pieces of varying size, but only 39 of which was I able to successfully salvage. And the fireflies flew away, all at once. Their glows vanished into the distance. And, as extraordinary as it was, that was the end of that night's activity. Since then, this case has had... I find it necessary first to verify safety. To verify that I, at this moment, am safe. For the record's sake. This is not something I normally do for case records, not something I have ever done, actually, but for case number 1488, I feel it necessary due to specific... I suppose you could call them interferences. Specific interferences related to the case's subject matter that have brought me into contact with, well, maybe it's best to simply state the events themselves. I will speak with candor when I say that this incident regarding the fireflies and the paperweight is, in fact, the first time a force decidedly paranormal has sought me out directly. In every other case of legitimate paranormal influence, it has been me forming the pursuit. Me searching for the supernatural aspect, not the other way around. And because of this, I saw fit to add certain countermeasures to my home, to use the same equipment that I would, at this point in a case, normally use in the environment of my client. After all, in case number 1488, I find it most effective to think of myself as the client, to think of me as the one reporting these supernatural events, the one standing witness at the center of it all. And with the fireflies' arrival, my home would certainly be considered an environment of paranormal influence. So, in line of countermeasures, I've installed thermal sensors on every corner of my home, inside and out, every turn of every hallway. And, as per my usual approach, I've linked these sensors to mounted cameras, rigged to flash photograph when a temperature above or below a certain threshold is picked up by the sensor. Basic paranormal equipment, really, but it can occasionally pick up something useful. It was 6 days ago that I installed them, fully intending to bolster them with something more substantial, but, well, every night since then, 6 times and counting, something that I, yet again, can only consider to be an anomaly has occurred. The same way, the same time, for almost a full week now. At 4:04 a.m., every night without fail, just as I've no doubt they will again tonight, the fireflies return. Again and again. And normally I probably wouldn't have noticed this, given that no real noise accompanies their arrival, but every time they come, the cameras go mad. They trigger all at once, over and over, every single one of them flashing several times for a whole minute, then abruptly ceasing as soon as 4:05 comes. Each camera takes approximately 30 to 40 pictures within that minute, totaling out at anywhere between 430 and 575 photographs in total per night. I collected all the photos, studied them on my computer, under magnifying glass, and even under a microscope, but there is nothing in any of them. Just the bare surfaces they were already pointing at. Even those that capture bits of the swarm directly show just that. A swarm of fireflies in my yard with nothing else. Stranger still, looking at the thermal sensors, despite the fact of the cameras taking so many photos, the sensors do not detect any kind of thermal outlier. There is no hot or cold source causing the cameras to go off, begging the question of what is. I've looked at the cameras, rewired them, even replaced a couple, but they still go off despite no input from the thermal sensors, offering no sign of why they do. If that wasn't enough, the shards of paperweight salvaged during that first record of findings, they respond even more interestingly. During the first night of the fireflies and the triggered cameras, I went from room to room in the house, just to keep track of their progresses, I suppose. And going into my study, where the shards are currently kept in a glass case, I saw them splitting, shattering even further, turning 39 into 51 even smaller pieces within 1 minute, quaking in the case as if under some immense invisible pressure. To my relative fortune, this actually made them thinner, and thus easier to observe under a microscope, which I had been intending to do ever since retrieving them, but it's just kind of odd, really. Why would this sentience, if indeed there is one, choose to do this? Choose to indirectly assist me in my investigation, especially after setting off my cameras in a decidedly unscientific way, an unobservable fashion, as if to mock me? very attempt at observing something. I'm getting ahead of myself. It's perfectly possible, as must be remembered here, that there is no sentience involved in this case. It's not unheard of for a paranormal influence to exist simply in the form of a force, a simple function of nature as natural as photosynthesis or the sway of a tide. I've yet to determine if this is the case, one way or the other, but given a fresh, new, testable variable in the form of those paperweight shards, I found it a pretty good start. These shards are just what I've been looking for during the entirety of this case. An actual, tangible, testable object. One that I've seen respond to stimulus in a specific way, and that I can possibly compel to respond, similarly or not, under different stimuli. Something I can study and draw parallels to, take into consideration the context and history of, and use these bits of knowledge to indicate the nature of the shards, and, by certain empirical extension, the nature of the influence itself. This paperweight, by chance that could scarcely have been predicted, is the anchor of case number 1488. It grounds this influence, whatever nature it may possess, into scientific, observable territory. And this is how I study it. This is how we will eventually inoculate. We're vast strides away from doing so yet, of course, but I just have a feeling about these shards. I have from the moment the paperweight shattered, and so, after seeing the influence of the fireflies on the pieces, I waited 5 more nights. Let the firefly's presence do its work upon the shards, breaking them down into smaller, thinner pieces. It's a more effective strategy to rely on the paranormal influence itself to do so. Though in many ways unstable and unpredictable, if the influence were to destroy any observable material, it would at least leave behind the marks of its own destruction to be studied as well, rather than man-made tools to jeopardize the observable matter and leave nothing to show but scalpel marks. And now, at last, a few of them are thin enough to observe, broken down to a width just barely beneath a millimeter. And so, I go to finally observe them. I will pick back up once I've done so, and more could be conclusively said. Suspend. Well, I'm not sure what can be said, all in all. I observed them, yes, and I did see a highly irregular makeup of the glass, as opposed to the regular, scratchy, cracked, fragmented appearance of glass when viewed from a microscope lens. I found a much more organized, fluid, and, well, one could say organic aspect to it. It is glass, of course, molten glass, as anyone could see from a cursory view, making the argument for some kind of organic component to the glass an ultimately weak one. But I can't deny a certain resemblance, I suppose. Paperweights, at least ones with a fluid-like appearance, such as this one, are traditionally made by trapping more precious forms of glass between air bubbles, meaning that it's potentially possible for some oxygen molecules to be suspended in the shard, resulting in a less mineral appearance under a microscope. But that doesn't really explain it, does it? It's not just a few trapped molecules, it's the whole thing. And even so, no oxygen molecule would have this level of organization to it. This number of attributes recognizable to anyone who has studied the most basic of sciences, nor would they be moving right before my very eyes. Moving and shifting and living. Living just like A human cell. Yes, it... Well, truly, it just needs to be said. The shards of this paperweight are alive. Its cells undulate, revolve, behave just as a human cell would, and I think of the sensation I felt when holding the paperweight. The sense of something being obscured, of something at least partially inoculated within the glass. Was it this? Was it the somehow human glass within the artifact? Or are these cells doing the obscuring? This possibly human life, inoculating an essence already present within the object? And if so, what is that essence? Is it the same element that caused it to burst when the fireflies came? Some force paranormally endowed to the object, making its glass surface a battlefield against the human life in that essence, and then, strengthened by the influence of the fireflies, the essence became strong enough to shatter it? If so, why don't I see that under the microscope? Why is the only thing I see the actively living cells of some poor... This paperweight. I was told by my scout that it was linked to a disappearance case, to the complete vanishing of its now missing owner, and I have to wonder, have I found him? Are these his cells? Am I looking at him? And why? I shouldn't ask this. I've really no grounds to ask this, but why did it want me to see this? Why did it break down its own glass territory so I could observe it? I suppose I felt I had tricked it. I had let its perverse influence work in my favor to make the glass shards readable, but oh, didn't it want me to read them? To see what it was capable of? I'm getting ahead of myself. Again. I can't let these factors distort the empirical reality of what I have. I have these shards. I have a testable variable. One that, with the presence of somehow living human cells within it, is all the more testable for it. That's good news. That means I can subject it to similar testing that one might subject human cells to, and record how it reacts. To begin, though, my current idea is to capture one such firefly of the swarm into a jar, then release it upon the shards while observing them on a microscopic level, and see how those human cells react. Do they die? Do they speed up, slow down? Is the breaking of glass due to mineral reaction, or the cells splitting off from one another as when skin is broken? There are plenty of questions, and I've no doubt they'll be... Suspend. I just returned from the police station. I was needed for questioning, you see. Because it seems that, well, there was a case of interest that I missed. And God knows how many others. Assuming that the police are right, when they say, let me organize my thoughts. The detectives asked me at my door if I was Adam Dwyer, and I told them I was. They explained to me a situation. That not too long ago, in fact, there was a suicide in the area, deeper into town and only recently discovered. A man stabbed himself in the sternum with a fork, dying of blood loss right there in his living room. The police said they hadn't been suspecting foul play exactly. After all, the man's roommate and close friend had just died a week or so before, and the corpse was found with quite a bit of alcohol in its system, but... well, he had left a note. A rather grisly one, they said, as it was written completely in blood. It wasn't legible, for the most part, and the parts that could be read were greatly unintelligible. Just a bunch of nonsensical phrases, albeit grotesque ones. But one part was both readable and understandable. A part that, well, it can't really be said whether or not it is, but the detectives said that at their approximation, the note named me, right down to the doctor title. And they recognized my name from my involvement with Howard Livingston, a key person of interest in case number 1488, so they brought me to the station. Showed me the note. What was it again? Dr. Adam Dwyer will be the one who sees it. That's what it said. Or so they think. They were kind enough to send me a scanned copy of the note, and looking at it here, I can't say it's an exact match with what they said. The letters are smudged and clumsy. It's clear it was written with the man's very fingernails. But if it is true, if that is what the words say, then this is informative, right? This is precious information I should be thankful for, really. After all,
The door opens slowly. Can you see me at night? Because I can see you. He's asking you. Can you see? Tongues have helped me in considering my contents.
Deeper and you found me.
Miss Dwyer, know what voice is which, and better yet, which voice is his.
I find it necessary first to verify safety. To verify that I, at this moment, am safe. For the record's sake. This is not something I normally do for case records, not something I've ever done, actually, but for case number 1488, I feel it necessary due to specific, I suppose you could call them interferences. Specific interferences related to the case's subject matter that have brought me into contact with discovered 2 more cases that appear comparable to those of Josiah Laren and Howard Livingston. One, Alexander Rose, a street musician who pled guilty for theft, kidnapping of an infant, and finally for murdering a stranger in an alleyway with a guitar string. Although he folded in court, not even bothering with an insanity plea, police records indicate that when he was arrested, he claimed that, quote-unquote, the song had overtaken him and caused him to commit the murder. This strange personification of his own music into something capable of homicide rang a somewhat familiar bell to Josiah's and Howard's confessions, albeit from a slightly different angle. I've collected what information on him that I could find and filed it into case 1488 as another candidate for what I will call, for lack of better terminology, possession cases, alongside Laren and Livingston. And joining him in that folder as well is a Mr. Heath Curtis, a man convicted of murdering his upstairs neighbors with a kitchen knife. This one did take the insanity defense, his only real justification as to his motive being that, quote-unquote, they left the door unlocked. Upon being asked what door, Curtis became very quiet and simply reiterated, the door. What this means is rather...
Here comes the doctor to put me back together. Here comes Dwyer to make me into words. He's afraid that I'll be around forever, but forever is already over.
Not sure what all to make of these findings. I'm afraid I will have to continue testing the variables, the paperweight shards, the constantly triggered cameras, until the gamut is run on methods. This may be a prolonged process, but such is the nature of Phase 2, which, for all intents and purposes, I consider case number 1488 to be in. I will also do the same deep dives on Curtis and Rose's cases as I did for Laren and Livingston, maybe even get a prison interview if necessary. I will record their responses to certain prepared questions, and what their answers will uncover is... well, I don't know what it is. Of course I don't. That's the nature of it. Perfectly regular. I work within a lack of answers at all times, so it's nothing to be concerned over. In fact, it's something to be excited over, isn't it? Isn't it? Well, I will pick back up once more evidence is uncovered. Suspend. What was that? Incarnation Red is created, written, narrated, and edited by c.s.w. The opening theme was written and performed by Annika Hansen. All music and sound effects used in this podcast are created in-house from scratch. For more information and updates, join our Facebook group Friends of Incarnation Red or follow our Facebook page, Incarnation Red, as always READ. For more information than that, you can follow me on Twitter at CSW_horror or visit my website, cswhorror.com. For behind-the-scenes looks and other scary content, you can follow me on TikTok or you can follow me on Instagram at Incarnation Red. Thank you for listening.